Hello everybody and welcome to the Blatantly Biased Racing Podcast, which for both of us will be a tired one because it's been long days of testing, which is early morning for me, late evenings for you, I would imagine. So
yeah, just the usual.
The good thing for me is that I have been working like crazy, so I got up at like 4 or 5 a.m. every morning, which meant I missed the early morning sessions, which are like the first one. So as a person who covers this for his job, you're going to be filling me in, I think, on a lot of what happened in testing.
Yeah, sure.
So I'll be playing the audience. Yeah, like usual. I'll be playing the audience during this, I imagine, being like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. Should we just jump right in?
I think so.
Let's go for it.
Nobody cares about us. Let's just get straight into it. Yeah.
I mean, yeah. And that's
Who
all
are we
right.
starting with?
Who should we start with? I think, okay, by the way, just to give a brief for how we are going to go about it, we're just going to go by team. Just basic idea of how we think they've actually fared in the last few days.
Yeah.
And then finally just share a pecking order and just few disclaimers when it comes to it.
Cool.
Okay. By the way, we'll also talk about two more things. Susie Wolf. Apparently, I got called a sexist.
You are
That's
a
new.
sexist, though, so that's fair.
And the Lewis Hamilton Times interview. I think maybe let's just touch on it a bit.
Okay.
A bit, not a lot. Okay, let's begin. First of all, let's start with McLaren.
This one
What's
I do know
your
a bit about, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is the thing, like, McLaren, I think, are still by far and away the favourites after testing. I wasn't sure how it was going to go, but for me, it looks like from everything I've seen, it's like the one that I have the most confidence in. And the reason for that is like they just didn't seem under any pressure at all to do any proper like performance runs. Like Lando did a couple of like runs when they were doing pit testing yesterday, and even like that casual run, as soon as he put his foot down, it was like lighting up purple sectors here and there.
Yeah.
So I think, between that and the fact that I was reading yesterday, may have been the race, may have been Autosport, I'm not sure where, may have been you texting me. I'm so tired this week, I have no idea. But I think Lando was like 31 seconds ahead if you put like the race times together. Now, obviously, there's a lot of caveats.
12 seconds. He was 12 seconds ahead of Kimi Antonelli and Leclerc. All three of them
if you put the three sectors together, it ended up like 31 seconds or something crazy.
It's basically so what happened was the race simulation by both Charles and I think Kimi was
It
there.
was Charles, Kimi, and Lando.
And Charles and Kimi, it wasn't optimal because they used the wrong tires.
Yes.
And for Lando did a perfect one.
Yeah.
So the gap was 31 seconds, but if you
get rid of some of
the variables and everything, it's around 12 seconds, which is still huge, by the way.
The thing was like, I think it was Gary Anderson or someone anyway, I believe it was, that kind of averaged out and had a look at some of the times alongside Mark Hughes. Mark Hughes, yeah. They were saying it looks like there's like a 4/10 advantage on certain.
Yeah.
Now the thing is as well, like when you take into account all of that, what's wild about that and what's kind of worrying maybe for the other teams, it's only testing, so we need to be careful on lap times, obviously. There's so many variables. But what is concerning about that is the fact that Bahrain is historically a really shitty track for McLaren as well. So like if they do end up, when we get to Bahrain, having like a 4/10 test or 4/10 advantage, that could be a lot more in Melbourne. That could be a lot more in some other tracks like Jeddah, for example, where, higher speed tracks as well. So like that is an ominous kind of worrying thing for the other teams, if that is the case. There's a lot of ifs though. But yeah. McLaren for me, it was everything about watching them. Like I think what downplayed it was the fact that this wasn't one of those testings where there was a lot of people in trouble and like, oh shit, what's happening here? So it didn't seem that big of an issue. But everything I saw from McLaren was just, we're just playing our own game. We're just, they just seemed casually kind of, unflummoxed by the whole thing and the lap times added.
I think that's what stood out for me because look, if you take a look at the laps, the number of laps they did and stuff like that, it's not something that stands out, to be honest. Mm-hmm. I think I tweeted about it on the first and second day as well. For the first hour and a half, 90 minutes or so in the first 2 days, they didn't really do anything. It was 5 or 6 laps, that's it. They were in the garage, they were working away. by the way, the first stint for McLaren was not impressive for Oscar because the car was just not dialed in. It took them some time to just get used to everything. What stands out for them is, again, by the way, it's not the metronomic manner in which we've usually seen a Red Bull or a Mercedes perform. It's a bit more like, of course, they're working through things, but whenever their car is on the track, it clicks.
Yeah.
And that's something that works for them. I'd still be skeptical of putting a number on the gap that they have. I don't think it would be a 4/10 or something.
If it's 4/10, I think they're going to wrap up the
That's
title.
it. Then the season is done.
Yeah.
Everyone can just shut it off because that gap is not getting surmounted in any which way.
No.
But I do think, again, in my view, I think the gap is not going to be that big. The reason behind it is we have one of the basic things. We've seen what Williams did in terms of lap times, what it was capable of. To a certain extent, I think that was probably the lap that Carlos Sainz did yesterday is probably the only representative lap time that we've seen where a team has just said, okay, just let's see what this car can do.
Yeah.
And it's very James Vowles kind of thing.
Yeah.
So you keep the performance out of it. The long runs are there, they're good. There's one caveat that a few people have touched on, and that is the very, very cold conditions. Always keep in mind, last season when conditions were this cold, there were teams that did well, and then there were teams that struggled. The team that struggled was Ferrari, almost every time.
Yeah.
And that's what somewhat, makes me think that maybe they might have something in place. Ideally, when I talk about McLaren, but for me, what stands out is 2024, 2023. One of the biggest issues that McLaren had was the fact that they did not start the season well.
Yeah.
They've nailed it this time.
Well, this is the key thing as well. It was like one of the things that Lando said that stood out to me was he said this car feels exactly the same as it did last year. Yeah. And when he said that, he's talking about how it ended the year. And let's remember how good Abu Dhabi was for them. So if they can start in Australia the way they ended in Abu Dhabi, that's going to be really problematic for the other teams because, like we saw last year, like obviously Max did a spectacular job, but part of the key advantage was he could take every risk he wanted to because he was so far ahead. And if McLaren can start the way they ended, even if the other teams do quickly close that gap, it only takes 3 or 4 races to the point where you're in a position where you can kind of make the other driver go, no, I'm not slowing down. You need to crash into me if you want to stop this because I've got a 2 race
basically
advantage.
What Max did.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Max had that advantage last year and he played every part of it. And like Lando does seem to learn from mistakes and let's be honest, Piastri is the type of guy who will play that game as well. So if McLaren can start the season well, like it's not just Lando, it's Piastri as well. And if they can have a 2 or 3 race advantage, that's going to make it very, very difficult for the other teams to kind of get on because especially for drivers like Max, for example, they're not going to be able to play the games they did last year because if you crash, it's disadvantage you. So McLaren are very much looking like the favourites,
I'd still give one caution, by the way, and the caution is that this is not the fastest. This is not similar to Red Bull being the fastest during the start of the ground effect era or Mercedes being the fastest during the, what should we call it, the turbo hybrid era. Because at that time, they didn't really have competitors. They had teams that were snapping at the heels, but the gap was 4 to 5 tenths of a second very, very comfortably.
Yeah.
I don't think that kind of gap would be there. And if the gap is around a tenth or 2, that's going to vary from circuit to circuit.
From circuit to circuit, definitely. Yeah.
Always remember last season, Australia, Ferrari dominated. And they dominated despite Red Bull being, again, Max had an issue, but I don't see him winning that race. He didn't really have the kind of pace to win that one.
Yeah.
The first race is going to be in Australia and Ferrari. I won't be surprised if Ferrari wins. Leclerc is brilliant around Australia, and that is something we have to keep in mind. We should all, sorry, just to jump in.
No, it's cool.
We should always keep one thing in mind. We should not consider or treat this McLaren as the dominant Red Bulls or Mercedes of the past. It's not the same. This is an entirely different ecosystem.
Yeah, like this is the thing that look, I hope you're right on that because it would be as exciting as it will be to get like a new champion, regardless of, whether it's Leclerc, Russell, Kimi. Hamilton's not a new champion, so I'm not going to say his name for anyone listening and wondering why. But like, if it's any of the guys who haven't had them, it would be very, very fun to see a new champion crowned. But I also do not want to see like a McLaren shows up and they're half a second ahead the whole way through the season, because that will be dull. What we want, like you said, is last season where you show up to every race not knowing who's going to win, and
precisely
perfection if that happens. So Franco Colapinto can win the championship.
Let's jump to the next one. I think that much is about it when it comes to McLaren. I don't think there's too big a detail.
No, it was kind of almost the perfect testing for them, really.
It could have been better. Honestly, it could have been better if Oscar got more time in and he got a few. I think Oscar is someone who would be a bit pissed. It kind of got screwed for him because it rained yesterday and it ate into his time. And I don't think he did the race simulation. I think
he did a race sim, he did one.
He did today, right?
Yeah. He was much faster than Mercedes. He was like 3 or 4 tenths faster.
3 or 4 tenths again,
Yeah, Ferrari and Red Bull weren't representative there, so there's no comparison. So it's only Mercedes and Williams that it was able to be compared to.
Yeah. And I think it was Haas as well who did the... But they only did long runs. I mean, it was a complete
Haas.
joke, honestly.
Yeah, it's also Haas.
And
who's next?
Saber. Let's go.
No idea. Wasn't really paying any attention.
Oh, that is precisely what Saber is. Honestly, Audi is in deep shit right now. By the way, that's the only conclusion I can draw from the entire thing, because I'm not entirely confident that McLaren will be at the sharp edge or it will be the fastest car in Australia. I'm almost 100% sure that Sauber will be the slowest car.
Yeah.
I have no doubts about it.
The only good thing going was, I was watching some onboards from Hülkenberg, and the car doesn't look extremely difficult to drive, but it also doesn't look very quick. Like,
it's low.
I know it's only testing, but it just... Every other car, there was points where I'm like, he's pushing that. I was like, this was just like...
It's benign, but it's pathetically slow. And that's the problem with Sauber this time around.
The problem with that is probably where, like, a lot of the engineers have been saying this season, like last season into this one, that, and Carlos Sainz was a big pusher on this, right? And Williams were talking about this, where you want like a benign car that you can then layer performance onto. The problem is, if you're at the back of the grid and you're Sauber, like, why would you waste time layering performance onto the car in the end of a reg cycle? So...
I think they'll have to, because in terms of confidence, this group of people are probably at an all-time low.
I think it's going to have to be written off. Like, I just don't see any reason to. They're going to have to pray for a Honda.
Honda?
Like a Honda 2008,
Yeah, it's too late for that even, honestly.
Yeah.
They've not brought anyone on board. I mean, James Key is fine, but... Is he the kind of person... There's no aggressive signing.
He's
There's
a
nothing.
perfectly reasonable midfield runner, which is not what Audi want. That's the problem.
That's the
James
problem.
Key did a great job, kind of working with McLaren in the midfield. But
in that transition phase.
Yes. He's like an Otmar Safnauer. Like, if you have a small team that's trying to kind of outdo what it can do or where it is, great. But when you want to get into the big leagues, he's just not the right guy, in my opinion.
Yeah, I know.
Maybe he'll prove us wrong. Maybe he'll prove us wrong. Speaking of maybe proving us wrong, I don't know if there's anything more to say on Sauber. Should we just move on to Ferrari?
I mean, I'm sad that Hülkenberg is part of this team, because I'm pretty sure I'd hardly pay any attention to this team.
Who knows, though? Hülkenberg could end up having a Jensen Button 2026. It's almost unlikely, but it's...
Not almost. It is unlikely.
Sorry, I meant impossible.
Yeah.
Almost impossible.
Yeah. Next up, Ferrari.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's your take on the whole thing?
Well, first of all, we can't compare Hamilton to anybody. Let's just make sure we touch on that. I did like that someone on Twitter immediately was like, "Oh, he's already complaining about the car." I don't know, like... Hamilton does seem to be settling in fine. I didn't see any huge issues there.
Yeah.
Which I was genuinely a bit surprised about compared to, I guess it's because it's Fred's Ferrari and they're taking it a bit more seriously now. Because I think if he had gone into, the Ferrari of Mattia, he probably would have been already pulling his hair out. So I think that's a good sign.
Yeah.
He seems comfortable, seemed happy enough in interviews, which is a good sign. Like the drivers not complaining is a good sign for Ferrari, and it's the minimum of what we want. Ferrari looked decent to me throughout. They didn't look incredibly quick, but I'm not concerned that they won't be in the same position they kind of ended last year in, if that makes sense. So I'm kind of thinking Ferrari will be
there and thereabouts.
Yeah, I think McLaren will still be quicker from everything I've seen, but I think they'll be kind of in enough space to where they can fight them. And I also see Hamilton as kind of, the way his attitude is, I think he could start the season kind of a bit better, a bit re-energized. And I think he could kind of be there. The issue Hamilton's going to have this season is the same as the issue I've kept saying, which is his teammate is Charles Leclerc at Charles Leclerc's team. That's always going to be a massive hill to overcome. So,
yeah.
But yeah, in terms of just testing and engineering and the car pace, it looked pretty good to me. Nothing told me it's going to come out as like the dominant force over McLaren, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be far off either. Like they didn't seem to struggle at all.
So what I could gather from, again, there is still a variability when it comes to the fuel loads and the power unit modes that they have in place. It does appear that Ferrari is a more dominant car on the straights. When it comes to the fast speed sections, that's where McLaren owns its bread. And then it's basically like this. The first sector is where Ferrari was ahead. Then you had the second sector, the twisty bits. That's where you saw McLaren come into its own. And then the final sector, again, Ferrari will pull a bit out of it. And I think that trend kind of mirrors how the 2024 season was. By the end of it, you saw you saw something similar on the similar lines. I think when I talk about, first of all, let's talk about just Lewis for a bit. I think the first day I was a bit worried because he seemed, probably it had to do with the fact that the track was green and it was a brand new car that he just got his hands on.
The engine as well. It's just such a big change. He's never driven anything other than a Mercedes in F1. So like a Mercedes,
and that
engine
makes a lot of difference. True.
Yeah.
So on the first day, I felt that first the car wasn't dialed in, and Lewis also took some time to get used to it. What worried me even more was the second session when we had, and Leclerc the Ferrari was on rails when Leclerc had it under him, and that was a contrasting view when it comes to two drivers. Day 2, Lewis was on top of it. He was more confident, and again, as you said, it's very easy to to see the frame of mind that Lewis has with the interviews. If it's just monosyllabic, then you know that things are not in the right place. Yeah. But he was more expressive, and the way he kind of conducted things. So I think in that sense, it's good. I think the true test is something that we've not seen yet, because even the fastest lap that Lewis did, I can bet my bottom dollar there was still at least half a second in there that he didn't really push. And that was the beauty of it, because the lap time was brilliant. I think it was 3/10 slower than Ferrari's fastest lap in 2024 on the same track, which shows that Ferrari inherently is a quick car around Bahrain. That's something that people are not really getting to. I think until the first qualifying session, we don't really know the kind of gap that's there between Leclerc and Lewis. I think until then, it's all vibes. Lewis is getting used to the car, great. But this car has not been driven at the ragged edge. And the impression that I got on the first day is that this is a Charles Leclerc Ferrari. It is very, very right on the edge. Everything is pretty much a typical understeer car. And that's something which usually Leclerc excelled in 2022.
Yeah.
You get back to that kind of a Ferrari again, because the last two Ferraris have not been that. 2024 was very oversteery, and Leclerc had to adapt a lot. That's why Carlos got the jump on him early in the season.
The issue with that is going to be that that Hamilton tends to like an oversteery car, so that could
True.
work against him, as the season goes
He
on.
does. But then you have to understand that this car is entirely built around Leclerc's demands.
Yeah,
Whatever
that's my
he
point.
wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like they say they're similar in driving style, but there is a few big differences, and
Yeah.
yeah. Look, I think that was always going to be an issue though, because like as much as Hamilton's a huge name in the sport, he's still coming to Leclerc's team, and it's, since Leclerc kind of came in and just fucking unexpectedly took on Vettel the way he did, look, Vettel fans here, obviously, as everyone listening to this probably knows at this stage, but like Leclerc has been the darling of that team, and Hamilton, again, as many accolades as he has, he's at the end of his career cycle, so they're not going to just change everything now to fit around Hamilton when the likelihood is he's only going to be there for 2 or 3 years, unless he starts off the season and puts Leclerc in his place. If he does that, obviously they'll.
I think
start
Lewis
moving
knows
things.
that as well. He knows how critical the first 3-4 races is, and if he's behind, I think it would be very. Look, if Ferrari turns up to Australia, and in the very first race you have Leclerc winning, and he's battling either a Lando or an Oscar, it sets the tone, and it's a tone that Lewis would not be comfortable with.
I think there's an underlying point on that as well, which hasn't really been discussed, which is Lewis, obviously, and Ferrari, and everyone talking about Lewis is talking about how, look, this is his betting in year, and really he's focusing on 2026 as the year to... Like that's... logically, it makes sense, right? But the problem with that from a background, like an engineering point of view in the back is, you're obviously going to focus your design for 2026 on the guy who is the fastest right now. Like, you're just going to, like, his lap times in the car is what you're going to kind of align things to. And if that's Charles Leclerc for half a season, most of the development in 2026 is going to be, okay, let's take Charles' lap times in the driver in loop and start, working around that, not around Hamilton, which puts him again on the back foot in 2026, So, like, look, I think
David
it was
Cross
just...
actually suggested this thing, by the way, that 2025 is the best opportunity, best and the last opportunity for Lewis to win a title.
I would agree with that, yeah, because 2026 is just a massive unknown.
Who knows what happens,
anybody,
right?
Like, from Aston to Audi. I was trying to say Aston to Audi, and I came out with Asti. From Aston to Audi, like anyone, it's very unlikely that Audi pull it off. But like, stranger things have. Braun GP literally happened. Like, there's a lot of differences in circumstances there. And
Binotto is not Braun, so
there's a Ross Braun there.
Thing.
Exactly, yeah. So, but like, crazy things have happened in the sport, so anything could happen, and that goes against Lewis, because if Ferrari in 2026 are like the 5th fastest team, like 2020 kind of situation, he doesn't have 5 or 6 years to kind of build with them in a project again. Like, he just doesn't. He could, but younger drivers are getting quicker. Older drivers are getting
basically
slower.
What happens.
It's
right?
just unfortunate.
How aging works.
Yeah. So, like, it's like the pipe dream. I would love to see Alonso win another title, but it's unless they have a dominant car in 2026, it's just not going to happen, Which they could, because
he's Alonso.
And because Newey is going there. So crazy things have happened. Let's just quickly, before we move on, touch on this thing that you brought up earlier, the Time magazine, just while we're on.
What was your impression? I'll give mine afterwards.
I had 2 sides to it, which was like, I kind of get where he was coming from on it. The problem is, right, I would need to actually hear him say it, because tone doesn't convey over text. So if he could be saying it...
Yeah, you've not come across it then. So what happened is, I don't think you've gone through the interview or the video of it.
No, I just read the text. So
I'll make it clear in that case. So what happened is, I think they've done it's a piss poor job when it comes to publishing an article when the video is there, because the quotes are just misplaced. The entire quote of him being built different and everything, it's written out of context. It's
Okay.
just they fit the big quotes in different ways just to create headlines, and that
Of
seems
course
to
they
be the
have.
case.
Yeah.
It's pathetic. Honestly, it's pathetic because I had an entirely different perception of him when I first saw the quote. Look, I laughed because for me the biggest thing is Lewis. Whenever Lewis says such stuff, it creates content.
Just to
It
give
creates
my
views.
just give my
So
take on
that's
it then
good.
from just
Yeah.
I just read it and you can tell me then what's
Yeah.
gotten me out of context. But like from reading it, I saw two parts to it that I was kind of like, why? Like you can't really put those two things together, because I was like, okay, the whole thing about like being the first and only black driver in F1 and how difficult it was to get there. It's like completely get that, especially when he was coming into F1. Like
Yeah.
there wasn't any sort of people on the look for anyone from his background to come into. It was a white country boys, or country club style sport, and to give him credit for that, his dad and him worked incredibly hard to get there, and there is no comparison for that particular part. And I was like, that if that was on its own, of like, you can't really compare how I got here, it's like, that's kind of fair, because there's a lot of other people who have really struggled. Like Liam Lawson's parents really fucking struggled to get him into F1.
Yeah.
So like there is comparisons, but like if you look at the time that he was joining, I'm kind of to put where it's coming from. It's like there was a lot more people on the lookout for a young white kid coming to F1 than there was for a young black kid. And the backgrounds, all that you can't compare. The way I took it is also like, the other part of it though, when you're like, you can't compare me to anyone, it's like, yeah, but as soon as you get to F1, you have to understand you will be fucking compared to everyone. So now you're a 7-time world champion, of course everyone's going to be comparing you to Schumacher. Like that's just going to happen. So I'm like,
Yeah.
if you disconnect those two things, I kind of get what he's saying. But when you connect them together, I'm like, okay, this is two different conversations though. Like if he's angry because you're going, well, you just like Schumacher, it's like, but I'm black. It's like, well, okay, but you're both F1 drivers, so of course you're comparable. Like skin color doesn't come into that. But if you're talking about coming up at the time you were, when everyone was kind of working, in a different way, it's like, yeah, okay, you can't compare those two things. I get that. Like it was much more difficult for you to get there than it would have been for a white kid. Like I get that. There is all those things. So yeah, it makes sense to me that you're like, yeah, they completely disconnected the way, like, because as much as I like to slag Lewis's fan base, he's not a moron. So I'm sure he knows people are going to compare F1 driver to F1 driver. Obviously,
it was exactly because the thing is, the way they wrote the whole thing was, you read, it's an entire interview, and how they tend to do is they share a few snippets and stuff, and they give a slight backstory to it, that we asked XYZ question or something, and the kind of background that they gave, and then the entire quote came, it made no sense. There was zero context, and that kind of ticked me off, because it seemed like it was rehearsed. That's the first impression that I got. But the thing is, the question that he was asked was, are you the GOAT? And once that question is asked, it makes sense. It kind of makes sense. Now the problem is, there is another quote that kind of ticked me off. I have not seen the video of it, so I have reserved my judgment on it, but it was the quote where Lewis addressed the fact that Eddie Jordan was quite vocal when he said that it's a preposterous call to actually do something like this. And Lewis's reply that old white men are, I try to ignore them. I found it a bit crass, to be honest. But again, I'm
need
reserving
to see the video.
Yeah, I need to see the video, because Eddie Jordan has been one of the biggest supporters of Lewis throughout his career.
Yeah.
And for him to turn around and say something like this, for him, it's a bit weird.
I just the whole.
Yeah.
I've talked about this.
Again, that's why, until I see the video, I don't want to put it like this.
Look, my take on that would be the same thing of just like, I've looked at this 100, like I've said this 100 million times before. I think our whole, and I say this, I know, which will upset a lot of people because I am in fact a white guy, but I think the entire approach to dealing with racial problems that we have in this era is just kind of absolutely ridiculous. And I think it's been personally, I think it's all down to social media algorithms trying to get everyone annoyed is the reason for it. But like,
I realized
the approach shouldn't be like old white guys. It's just like, okay, if anyone thinks backwards, then let's deal with that. Like, not all old white guys are bad people who are racist.
That's why actually I'm not putting it on Lewis, because I really want to see the video before I
and like
apportion the blame on him on this thing.
And let's be honest, like, there's a lot of old white guys that Lewis absolutely admires and loves. So, like, it depends on what the question was, what the context was, what his demeanor was, what the tone was. There's all these different things. So it's kind of like, as you said.
And the bigger thing is, was he even talking about Eddie Jordan? Because I'm skeptical of that.
I would be doubtful as well, because the two of them are very, very, like, not like massively close, but they are. They're quite close, yeah. So,
and we've seen Eddie being one of his biggest defenders for a long time. Even when the 2011 season happened, I remember Eddie being one of the more staunch supporters of him, and he's been that for a while. The
thing is, context matters so much, because, and this is my whole thing, is like, this is why I hate this defining everything by race now, which is what annoys me. We're trying to, like, the idea before was to try and get away from that. Like, celebrate your culture, celebrate your race, celebrate your heritage. But let's not fucking define everything by that, because that's exactly what we were trying not to do. Because I'm sure there's a lot of old white guys that Lewis Hamilton absolutely loves. One of them he just talked about the other day was, me and John Elkin have gotten on for so long. I'm sure him and that old white guy get on fine.
Well, thank you for bringing that up.
Me and Ron Dennis.
Thank you for bringing that up, by the way. Yeah, by the way, just to close the chapter on Ferrari, what the fuck was John Elkin doing? And I think this was something that we predicted last season, right?
Yeah.
Too many big Ferrari guys making an appearance far too many times inside the Ferrari motorhome is not a good thing, at least in my view. I might be entirely wrong, but I don't think John Elkin should be anywhere near the Ferrari motorhome.
Mm-hmm.
Especially not in a preseason test. It's not even a race. It's not at Monza. It's not any special race. It's not Silverstone or anything. He's at a freaking preseason test. And that's... By the way, Leclerc would also be keeping an eye on it. And I'm not entirely sure how he'll take that. But yeah.
Anyway, right. Who's next? Williams. I'm really happy. Look, the headline time from Sainz and even like Albon's very, very good time today, I don't take any of that as like a big deal, because
I do.
Okay.
1 second quicker than what Williams managed last season.
Sure. But I'm saying
not even qualifying.
The time specifically doesn't bother me. The fact that they were able to go out and set that time says everything compared to where they were last year.
Yeah.
Because last year they were in no position to go on a kind of glory run, let's see what this can do, because they had other shit to worry about.
Yeah.
So the fact that they were prepared, the fact that as well, they also have updated the car and kept the same chassis, I think is a very, very, very pragmatic approach from James Vels. It's like, why change the chassis completely? Alpine have done this as well, but I have less faith in Alpine. We'll get to that later. But Williams look great. I'm excited. I'm not expecting them to be anywhere near the top 4 teams, but I think they could be.
They might
maybe. Who knows? Things could be that close this year.
Andrea Stella actually pinpointed both Williams as well as Alpine as what his view is that we won't have a top 4 this time. I think he's right in some way. That last season what we had was there were top 4 teams, and then there's a big gap, and then you had the top and the bottom 6 teams.
That gap should be a lot smaller, basically.
Yeah. He's saying the gap's gone. What's going to happen is you're going to see, because what happened was there was this entire thing of in Q3 we'll have the top 4 teams, 8 drivers, and you're basically fighting for P9 and P10. So that kind of nonsense might be done, because a driver can now make a difference. If there's a gap of around 2 to 3 tenths, that's where driver.
I always say if it's 2.5 tenths or less, the driver can make a difference, because there's so many little variables of like getting the tire in the right position, like all these different things. And they've got 2 drivers who could. Carlos Sainz 100%. Alex Albon, I want to see, because Alex Albon's a very, very good driver, but I just feel like
this is a litmus test, right? This is because a true litmus test for him.
Like, he fell apart in Red Bull, but like everyone falls apart alongside Verstappen. It's Hamilton, Vettel, like all these drivers in the past, they've kind of been similar where but Verstappen's
they do this to their teammates.
Verstappen's up there with like Senna and Schumacher, where teammates just fall apart around them. So
that's fine. I mean, I think that's all right. I think take that.
I think Sainz is a proper litmus test because Sainz is a known quantity, and Sainz, like, I don't for a second have the excuse in my head of, oh well, if he beats Sainz, like maybe Sainz just isn't adapting to the car because Sainz famously, but also Sainz just famously adapts to cars very, very quickly. Like every team he's been in, he's been like up to scratch like immediately. So yeah, this is going to be a proper benchmark year.
P5, P6, right? That's where you'll put them in the pecking order, roughly.
Yeah. I honestly, I wouldn't be surprised P5 because I think any sort of operational issues, I think James Vowles is going to be on top of that straight
Exactly.
away. Whereas Alpine, Alpine might have the car, but I couldn't see them having the operational.
The driver lineup is also not up to scratch. I mean, Dune is. We'll talk.
This will
about
change
that.
when they put Colapinto in after race 2. Anyway,
out you go. Out you go, Jack.
Hit the road, Jack, and don't come back no more.
By the way, also I'm also happy for Carlos as well because he knew he was. I mean, he got a kick up the backside in the absolute worst manner when it comes to Formula One, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm happy he's also got a
twice
decent
he got kicked out of teams that he went to build a project around them.
Oh yeah, true. I think
Ricardo
he was kicked out of Renault. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
True.
Yeah.
I forgot about that one.
And he could have been at Red Bull if it wasn't for Verstappen. Realistically, he was good enough to have been.
He could have been at Red Bull if he had stuck around for 2019. Remember, he jumped 1 year earlier. If he had just stayed at Toro Rosso for another season, he probably would have been promoted alongside Max.
Yeah.
A lot of things, but again, he's had a decent enough career, right?
Speaking of Red Bull,
yeah. What do you make of it?
I've no idea. Like, I genuinely don't because, like, I saw a lot of Max Verstappen fans on Twitter freaking out because he hadn't set a time, and then he set one, and they were all like, "But times don't matter," in and then all of a sudden when Max went to the top, like, "Oh, times matter now," and it's like, "Oh, shut the fuck up," just stop, like, just the usual stuff that we hear from every hyper fan base now.
Obbs had a good take on the whole thing. I think Obbs, the kind of prediction he made, it kind of seems to be working out, isn't it? He said that McLaren will start on the front foot. That's been the case. He said that Red Bull. Okay, what's overall, if Red Bull looks back at the entire test, what do you think their impression would be?
I just think it'll be uncertainty. Like, I'm just not sure how much they know because they missed a lot of running with Lawson yesterday, wasn't it?
The long runs were good from him. They
yeah,
were not
but I mean,
fast,
they missed a lot of laps,
zero
right?
degradation.
They missed a lot of laps though, right? They had some big issue.
Rain played a role. Yeah.
No, but also they had to fix something, didn't they? On top of everything else.
In the first, when he started the race simulation, it had to be cut short because I think there was some water leakage or something that happened.
Yeah, water leak. That's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they've got that. Like, the thing is, they had that, and then they had like when I was watching Verstappen running, there was points where it looked like, oh, he's really comfortable, like they're on top of this car. And then points where it looked like the car was kind of twitchy. Lawson had a few kind of offs, which I kind of expected because, he's embedding with the car and everything. It's fine. But that also means the car isn't very benign. It means it's still... Because Lawson, we can talk about pace-wise compared to Verstappen all day, but he is a very adaptable driver.
He's a good driver.
And his time in Super Formula, like, that's not an easy thing to adapt to either.
Yeah.
So, like, him spinning,
he almost won as a rookie. So
like, him spinning and going off tells me the car isn't exactly simple to drive compared to some of the others. But then it was Max's like kind of head shake coming across the line at one point as well. And when he walked into the garage a couple of times, it was kind of like he had to be kind of like relax a bit, like there was a couple of moments I saw that where obviously the camera plays up to that, so we can't read too much into it, but
yeah.
It's just
it
didn't seem as smooth as like kind of with some of the other teams, Williams and McLaren in particular, where it looked like everyone was like, yep, that was a good test. Red Bull just didn't seem like they were like, well, we don't know where everyone else is.
We're doing a lot of things.
Yeah. So I have no idea where they'll be when it comes to Australia. Like, not a clue. They'll either be right up there or they'll be the fourth fastest or third fastest team, like, kicking about. I don't know. I have no idea, is the honest answer.
Yeah, I think if Red Bull looks back at the entire 3 days, I think if Max is realistic, I think he should be. I think the first impression that he should have is he can win the championship with this car.
Yeah.
And I'm being very honest about it.
Mhm.
The reason is, I think you have to understand one thing. It was only in Austin last season when the upgrade came and Red Bull realized that, okay, this is where we'd fucked up for the last 18-20 months.
Yeah.
So from that point, just to get to a point where they are within striking range of McLaren. Because again, I don't think McLaren is 4 tenths ahead. I think there are a couple of tenths that it has on the opposition.
Mhm.
But again, that's manageable. That changes from race to race. That changes from cold to hot conditions. A lot of factors come into play. Max is going to win races this season. He has the best operations unit behind him. I won't be surprised if he wins the championship again. It's going to be intense. A lot of fuckery is going to happen, and I think if he's smart enough and if he keeps his cool, if he did not come into this season thinking that the deficit would be gone,
Mm.
then I think he'll be realistic and he'll understand it. Okay, things are there. We are in the window. I think that's what Red Bull wanted. They are in the window. They can work around it. I think that's how they should approach it.
I think the real issue is going to be like we could have a season not specifically like 2021, but like 2021 in just the case of every weekend is going to be. Sure, but what I mean by 2021 is specifically Verstappen showing up every weekend and perhaps not having the fastest car or being in a really difficult situation or things working against him, right? And I think what kept them in the fight was one, obviously Verstappen's, just incredible talent, to be fair. But also the fact that the team was very much together through all of that season. They were working as one core unit, fighting back against Mercedes, the FIA, everything throughout that season. Sky. Yeah, so Red Bull were very, very much a unit during that to win that. And I think what could derail Verstappen this season, if he's not careful, is a certain man who likes to throw the baby out with the bathwater, Jos. Because if they start off with a difficult season, out of the bathwater. Yeah, if they start off with a difficult season, right? Max famously can get annoyed, but we saw last season, he does just put his head down and get on with it after a while. And I think they could do that. What he doesn't need is Jos Verstappen fucking going off on tabloids and putting pressure on a team that's already lost a few key members. He could easily get into a situation if the last thing he needs is Christian Horner going fuck you and turning on him and just going no, we're going to put support behind Lawson when anything, I know that's unlikely.
Get a replacement in.
Yeah, I know that's unlikely.
Contract is done.
Yeah, and on top of that, Max is only one big penalty away from a race ban. So
he's at 8, so 2.
Yeah, but
the worst is 3 that they get.
Sure, so there are but 2. That could happen in one race.
I mean, the man flipped a bird just recently.
Yeah, but
for no reason whatsoever.
Well,
by the way,
let's put it this way:
he wasn't even angry.
Yeah, well, let's put it this way: he goes to Australia, does something silly. There's 2 points, right? He shows up at Jeddah. He's got Jos going off at everyone in the background, and on top of that, gets a race ban for the third race. That's it. That could end the whole thing, before it even begins. So
exactly.
I hope Jos just fucking calms the fuck down and is a grown up for a change. You've done the hard work. You've gotten your son a championship, multiple championships he's won now. Just fucking relax, calm down, let him enjoy it. He won't.
So basically, what you're getting to is if Red Bull acts as a team like it has in the past, I think they have a strong chance of pulling it off. But will they or will they not? I think this is the most vulnerable they've been.
Mm-hmm.
I think this might be the toughest championship that Max has had until now. And I'm including 2021 because in 2021 he had the car. I don't think he has the car in the same manner.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the third or fourth at this stage. I don't
keep going for a sec. I'm just replying to something.
Yeah, go for it. So I think for me that's the biggest worry, to be honest, because if Red Bull does not have the car, and in the first 2 to 3 races, what you see is Max not even being on the podium. I think it's at this time either Max can take it in his stride and act like, okay, this is how it was supposed to be, and you try to build on that, making the most of every weekend again and again and again. That would win him the championship. But is he willing to do that or not? Because look, the blueprint is there for him. It is Alonso 2012. People try to portray Ferrari as the 10th as the worst car in Formula One history. It wasn't the case. The car was still capable enough of P6, P7, and that's where Alonso tended to be.
Yeah.
Plus, there were a lot of drivers that were just not good enough. You had Maldonados and co, which was basically crashing far too many times. Alonso's point was he'll finish P5, P4, P5, P5, P4, maybe snatch a few podiums, win a few races, and use that to have a buffer in terms of a lead. Max can follow that blueprint perfectly, and place himself in that
I just
place.
think, look, he's going to have to. I think he's probably going to have to adapt this season to some of that.
It's a legacy-defining season. I think it might be if he wins this season. Just imagine.
It's just because, like, what I touched on earlier, which is just, a lot of his fans praised how much he's able to play the rules last year when, like, making basically putting the emphasis on the other driver, right? And Lando got a lot of shit for basically not being aggressive enough with him. And I agree with that, and that makes sense, right? But the problem is that what people just didn't take into account the whole time is, sure, but Max has the advantage to do that. So, like, Lando doesn't. If Lando DNFs and Max keeps going, it's game over Lando. Whereas if Max DNFs but takes Lando out, it's advantage Max. So Max was able to play that game. This season, if Lando or Piastri or Leclerc, whoever it is, ends up with like a 20 or 30 point advantage in race 4 or 5, Max can't do that anymore because it's disadvantage Max if he crashes. Like, if they had an Austria situation again, that was advantage Max because Max was ahead. But if that happens again and it's reversed, Lando could easily just say, yeah, fucking crash into me. I'm 40 points ahead. I'm beating you anyway. If we lose, you lose, not me. So, he has
there are a lot of variables, right?
Yeah, so
there's
I think
also
that,
this variable of where a Leclerc would
Jos,
be, right? I mean, there's also the variable of where a Leclerc or a Lewis would be. Or maybe if Mercedes is competitive enough and where a George might be. There are so many things that could actually happen. And I think that's why I, specifically picked the 2012 example, because it wasn't until later in the season that Alonso and Vettel kind of separated themselves from the field. Because earlier it was, I think, Button started the lead. Then we had Lewis leading the championship. Kimi was there and thereabouts. But then by the end of it was Alonso versus Vettel. I think that's how it is going to pan out. And I think a lot will come down to consistency and tenaciously, getting results every race, again and again and again. And if Max is smart, he just needs to go back, sit down, and the first reaction should be, I can win the championship. I think that's what he needs to keep in mind. That's the kind of takeaway that I kind of got throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, I just think it's going to be interesting to see how he does this season, because like you said, I don't know if it's legacy defining, but it'll definitely tell us more about Max, because
true.
Like, is he just one? Like, can he adapt to this different situation, or is he just kind of like an overly aggressive? Like, I'm just going for this, Like, can he play the games the way like a Schumacher did, for example? Where he would kind of. Now, Schumacher took it too far at points before anyone says it. I'm aware of that. But my point is, he did adapt to like certain situations.
I'm not going to say that, by the way.
No, people in the comments will. So, yeah.
Still do that. Drop your views in the comments.
Yeah, go nuts. Call me a bald bastard, whatever you want. What was I going to say? So, who's next on our list? Racing Bulls?
Yeah.
Moving on. Yeah, moving on. Who's next?
Okay. By the way, the car just looks nowhere. They've not done anything representative, which makes, inspires any kind of confidence. I'm worried for Yuki. I think he gets smashed. Not in terms of losing to Hadjar, but losing a future seat in Formula One. Because Cadillac is already... Colton Herta is the one that they're signing, and they're also probably going to sign Sergio Perez. So there's no seat available for him. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. The only good
Mercedes.
thing
Sorry,
for
go for
Yuki,
it.
I was just gonna say the only good thing for Yuki is the thing that I don't know who brought it up on commentary, but I remember someone being like, "Well, if Max does get that race ban, Yuki's probably the only person who can drive." So that could be the upside, you know. Now, speaking of speaking of crazy things, let's get to Mercedes.
Yeah.
You or me first?
I was slightly happy by how the first day went, but then Toto Wolff pointed out something, and yeah, it even has me worried. He said that usually the temperatures are very low. It's cold as fuck. We should be 2 seconds faster than everyone else here. Why are we slow? And he's right. These are Mercedes conditions. Why are they slower? And I had not factored that into my entire analysis. That these are Mercedes conditions. What the fuck is going on? And they are, in terms of pace, they are fine. I don't think there's too much that they'll be worried about. I think they're third or fourth fastest. There's race pace, that is where they seem to have some worries. Both Russell and Antonelli. By the way, word on Antonelli, good. He's fast. That's all.
Very quick, and also not as slidey crashy as I expected, which is good.
Yeah.
I know it's only testing, but I was expecting to see Antonelli off the track a lot more than I did. Like, because he is the type of kid who pushes it, you know. So
he's not a Max, by the way, in any which way. By that I mean you won't see him pull off audacious moves too many. I mean, there will be a few, but it's not his. For that, you have to look at Ollie Behrman. He's a bastard behind the wheel, to be honest. And there will be a lot of those moves this season. Kimi is more measured in that sense. He's fast, probably much faster than Ollie, but when it comes to wheel, Ollie Behrman is the guy.
Yeah. I don't know. I think Mercedes is another one like Red Bull, but in a different manner, which is Mercedes seemed to be fine, but then they were also kind of fine at the end of last year, and they were in this position where they were either incredibly quick or they were the fourth fastest team. There was kind of no in between, you know, like they were either ahead of everyone or they were behind everyone in that pack. And I just don't see anything that tells me otherwise. Like, I think realistically it's going to be a McLaren, Ferrari are ahead of them. The question realistically is going to be, have they got a more stable platform that they can extract more from than Red Bull? And that could put them in the fight. You know, that, you know, the thing that I think goes for Mercedes this year that's good is that they've got two drivers, one of which is highly underrated, which is George Russell, and the other of which could be the guy that just comes in and just goes fucking crazy and, you know, could end up just throwing everyone a weird curveball. The exciting part for Mercedes is I think that towards the end of last year at least, even though a lot of the time, like, you know, they were ahead of everyone when it was cold, for example, they were always there and thereabouts. And I think they'll be in that situation again. And the fact that we've got so many drivers now in that kind of like, you know, depending on the circuit, we could see Mercedes fighting for the title. Like, you know, we could see George Russell, who I think is one of the top drivers on the field right now. We could see George fighting for the title. Yeah. And may I say, if George wins the title, there's going to be some very, very fucking angry Hamilton fans. So enjoy that. I meant to ask you a question with Red Bull, by the way. Do you think there's any chance of Lawson pulling a 2014 Ricciardo?
No. He's not a Ricciardo.
Yeah, me neither. But yeah, I just thought it was a funny question.
Yeah. I mean, it would be a funny story, but he's not of that caliber.
No.
Again, not a... Yeah, actually, it is a knock on Lawson, but he's not the caliber of Daniel Ricciardo. Mm-hmm. And people do not understand. By the way, in case anyone is listening and who does not agree with this, 2014 to 2016, Daniel Ricciardo was the better driver compared to Nico Rosberg, and there's no debate about it.
Yeah.
Fuck off.
Moving on, I guess. Do you want to say anything about Mercedes? I think that's it, really.
Yeah, it's... The thing is, whatever they do this season is going to be a bonus. to a certain extent. They don't have that many expectations. Lewis is gone, so they have this period. I think it's the best thing that has happened to them, and there's actually a direct parallel with Honda in MotoGP, because they also let go of Marc Marquez, the biggest asset. Until he was there, everything was around when can Marc win again, when can Marc win again. It was the same with Lewis. Once that is gone, the pressure is off. Now they can, if they win races this season, they'll be happy.
Yeah.
If they don't fight for the title, again, it's not a good look, ideally. It's not something they're banking on in any which way. They're banking on 2026. So whatever again, first race, either Kimi Antonelli or George Russell wins, that completely flips the apple cart, because then you're into the championship fight, whether you like it or not, and then things start turning. But yeah, let's see what happens with them.
Okay. Do you want to say anything about Susie Wolff and Toto Wolff, or do you want to just?
Oh yeah. By the way, so apparently, I'm not sure you've come across it. There are reports from British media, multiple. Earlier, it was only from Daily Mail, and I ignored
just
it.
Explain your sexism. Come on.
Yeah. So apparently, Susie Wolff is the candidate that is being prepared, or she's planning to run against MBS for the FIA president's role. I have my views. I put them out on social media, regrettably, and got called.
Why do you say regrettably? Who cares what some anonymous idiots think? Like, you know. Whatever.
No, they have their names. Apparently, there's one lady called F1 lawyer or something. So I tried to keep.
So I assume she's a twat. Yeah, go on.
Yeah. Your words, not mine. Feelings mutual, but apparently no. So in my view, again, one very basic thing, that's a major conflict of interest that should not be happening.
See, this is where, like, I saw your post, right? And you're obviously a racist, a sexist, all these other things, misogynist. We know this. We know this.
Yeah.
No, like, this kind of goes back to the whole racism thing that I was talking about earlier, where everything is just made out to be a completely different fucking argument, right? Because, like, I saw your post and I kind of was like, yeah, I kind of agree with, like, we need to be careful with these conflicts of interest, right? But, like, I argued it, like, in my head immediately went to, like, I thought the same thing when, like, John Todd went from Ferrari to FIA president. It's a bit like, I don't know if this should happen. And then, like, I was also like, well, even Ross Brawn going to be, like, the technical head of the FIA and F1. Was he technical directive or he was on the rules?
He was basically the FOM chairman, the role that Stefano Domenicali is doing right now. He was doing that role.
Ross Brawn. Yeah, he wrote the rules for 2022.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, he oversaw it, right?
So, like, all of these different things where I'm like, that's a conflict of interest as well. You know, like that.
Why?
Because he basically owned Mercedes at one point. You know what I mean? Like, was part of Mercedes. My point is,
he's
like,
the thing is, that's
sure.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, my point is more like these conflicts of interest, exist all the time, right? And I knew as soon as I saw your thing, when I went into the comments, I would see people going, well, you were fine with this, and you were fine with this, and you were fine with this. My argument with that immediately, and I went into the comments and saw that straight away. People were like, oh, well, no one was complaining when, Ross or John Todd became FIA president. And I was like, well, I was saying that probably shouldn't happen. That doesn't mean that we just go, oh, well, it happened before, so it's fine this time. Like, no. We should be able to have the fucking conversation. Like, that was a conflict of interest, and I don't think it should have been the case. Turned out kind of fine. There was some points where I'm not sure it did. 2019, for fucking example, where certain team that he used to run just had to pay a fine, and that was it. Like, when they were clearly cheating. So these conflicts of interest happen, and that is a perfect example as to why we should be careful, because Susie Wolff and Toto Wolff being married, if that was to happen again and Mercedes cheated, she would have to recuse herself, or we would have all these issues, which John Todd didn't do in the Ferrari incident. So, like, your point is valid, and it would be valid regardless of which way around it was. If Susie Wolff was running Mercedes and Toto Wolff went to be FIA president, I would be asking the same thing. And that was what annoyed me when you sent it to me and someone was like, oh, this is so sexist. Like, if it was the other way around, you'd be arguing this. And I'm like, yes, of course I fucking would be.
Yeah.
Like, it has nothing to do with whether she has balls or not. It's who is her husband. So, like, And then everyone going, as I said earlier, like, oh, but John Todd was for... It's like, yeah, of course, that was an issue as well. Like, thank you for proving my point. Like, that was an issue. Just because it happened doesn't mean this isn't an issue. Like, that was an issue. Why are we doing it again? And the only comment on it, and I'll let you, because I know it's your thing, like, the only comment on it that did make sense was, sure, but, the president of the FIA oversees lots of different sports, not just F1. I'm like, you know what? That is a valid point. So as long as it's a case of she goes in, and if there's something to do specifically with Mercedes or that could advantage Mercedes, I think she should have to recuse herself there. And if that was the other way around, as that woman said, if it was the other way around where Susie was the Mercedes boss and Toto was going for it, I think it would be exactly the same. It has nothing to do with who has testicles and who doesn't. Like, it's ridiculous. And they're married, so she whatever. And I'm like, no. The point is, yes,
I'm
they're
not even
married.
questioning her integrity. It's not even about questioning. It's basically, it's a poor look for the sport.
Yeah.
It comes down to that.
And
again, I'll just, by the way, all these things that you mentioned, Jean Todt ended all ties with Ferrari in 2008 or 2009 when he moved and became the FIA president. Mm-hmm. That's part of the role that he did.
She's not going to be able to end all ties with Toto because they're married.
Exactly.
Like, this is...
I mean, again, Lawrence, friend of the podcast, he's been here and he argued that Toto would be fine selling off all his shares and every association with Mercedes. I'm like, are you sure? The team is worth $5 billion and he owns 33% of it. He might love her a lot, but that's $1.65 billion of divestment that makes arguably not much sense.
But like the thing is, like, the problem here is just a simple one, which is like, I don't doubt her integrity, and I've seen Susie Wolff in interviews and so for many, many years now, and I don't think she would ever do anything in that light. Like, I don't think
the problem
she
is not even that. The problem is just last season what happened. It's been a decade or more than that where we've had issues with the flexi wings, right? Mm-hmm. That's been one of the biggest issues. Last season, there were two teams that introduced the upgrades that ultimately led to them having flexi wings. FIA, out of the blue, what did they do? They did not really do any clamp down or any such thing. They let them go ahead with it. Those two teams were McLaren and Mercedes. That ultimately decided the championship. Now imagine if Susie Wolff is the FIA president and that call is made.
Can I just put it to you in an even fucking simpler way? Like, the problem that the FIA is going to have is no one has... Like, if this was a different organization, right? If it was like... If she was going to be... if she was going to be F1 president, right? Like, if she was going for Stefano Domenicali's job, I would say, this is fine. They will figure out a way to kind of go, right, any decisions pertaining to Mercedes, she's going to have to step back, not have input, let someone else... They'll figure it out. When it's the FIA, nobody has that fucking confidence, right? Like,
exactly my
let's
point.
put it this way. Last year, people were complaining that Johnny Herbert was handing the fucking job or the championship to Lando. People were online shouting that Derek Warwick owning a fucking Honda dealership means that he clearly is in bed with Max Verstappen. So no one has any confidence in anything to do with the FIA. So why would you put yourself in a situation... Like, the point is, I just don't think it will be handled well. And the only reason I think personally, what am I trying to say? What I'm trying to say is, I think if this does happen, right, Susie Wolff will probably do all those things because she's run things very well in the past. And she'll probably go, she'll be the first one to come out and go, I'm not being part of this discussion. I'm stepping down and letting X or Y run it. I'm sure she'll do that.
Problem is,
you will still have the annoying fucking idiots on Twitter all day being like, well, it's just because she's her husband. That's why this happened. And that's what I don't look forward to if that happens. That said, my final point is surely she's better than Ben Sulayem regardless. No?
Oh yeah, of course. But it's a bit like you're going from one shitty option to another shitty option. Let's go for a decent option.
I'll push back on that a little bit. I think
Claire Williams. Claire Williams.
Sure. My point. Yeah.
She's. I have zero problems.
But her name is on a race car. Conflict of interest.
No, everything is sold.
She hasn't got testicles. She shouldn't be in charge of anything. Let's just get. No, I'm joking. Look, I think Susie Wolff is a great like a great option. I really do think she'd do a brilliant job, but I think your point is also valid, and I think this is the problem with these arguments, which is someone coming in and going, "Oh, it's sexist. You're just saying that because she's a woman." It's like, no, I'm not. That has nothing.
It's not even that.
Like your point was obvious. It was like, let's talk
Exactly.
about the conflict of interest.
Yeah.
It's nothing. Like if roles were reversed, you would have still said the same thing. Like if Toto was going for the job, you'd still say it. And I guarantee you, if she argued, because I saw the response, she argued that if roles were reversed, you wouldn't be saying it. And it's like, no. If roles were reversed, I would still be saying it. And annoyingly, if roles were reversed, you'd still be saying the same fucking comment, but with the opposite way around. You'd still be making it sexist because you don't want to have an argument. It's just easier for you to go, oh, you're just sexist or racist, instead of actually arguing the point. So let's move on before I get annoyed, unless you have anything final to say on it. Did I say before I get annoyed? Because I'm annoyed. Because people are fucking just... Anyway, I can't say the R word anymore. Speaking of the R word, Haas, how do we think they're doing?
Oh,
I
don't know.
I like Haas now.
Yeah, I don't know. The problem is they put too much fuel in the car. That's the biggest problem with them. Ideally, looking at how I think Ocon did a few performance runs at the end of it, but it was quite clear that the car was still pretty much laden with fuel, even at that stage. The kind of laps that he was putting together, on the safe side, I'll say that they are the 7th fastest car right now. But Haas was also a car that struggled when the temperatures were colder.
Yeah.
And I don't think they have shown the representative pace until now, because they never do. In the last couple of years, and under Ayao Komatsu, they don't. And Ayao Komatsu has also been very, very vocal when it comes to the performances that the Haas has. According to him, they've made significant jump from last season. If they have, they shouldn't be 7th. They should be higher. But let's see. I think for now, just to be on the safe side, it's 7th.
They didn't take the new suspension from Ferrari either, right?
Yeah.
So,
they wanted to go in their own direction.
I think that's pragmatic as well, because they would have had to do so many changes that Ferrari would understand that they wouldn't directly have the understanding of. So
exactly.
Yeah, Haas is one it's kind of like Racing Bulls. I don't really have much to say. They didn't look terrible, but there was nothing really stand out either. It was kind of like, okay, I have no idea where this is.
Yeah.
Speaking of terrible, Lance Stroll's team.
Yeah. They are 8th fastest at best. I mean, on a good day, I think they'll be 8th. I feel for Alonso. I honestly feel for Alonso because this will be the first race he'll be going to. 2 years back, he was fighting for P2 with Lewis Hamilton on this very track in Austin. In Australia.
Bahrain and Australia, yeah.
Yeah, both of them. And now it will be... he'll be fighting what? Gabriel Bortoleto, probably?
I think...
Jesus.
It's going to be interesting because Newey starts work on March 5th, which is next week.
Next week.
So... I'm going to be interested to see what Newey says when he comes in, because obviously until now he can't...
I'm leaving.
What
the fuck have I done?
He can't openly talk about it. And like a lot of the engineering departments and like have talked about the fact that, you know, you can't give up on 2025 because there's a lot of learning you need to do for 2026, right?
He's right. They're right,
But I wonder, will Newey come in and say like, yeah, but we can more effectively just work on 20... This is a waste. Or will he come in and, you know, dramatically change things? Because... I just don't know if Aston maybe is the one team that maybe should just go, look, we have all the resources. We kind of have enough people that understand the way these... Like, there's a lot of teams that need to do the learning. But when you've got Newey coming in and you've got Enrico coming in next year, who, by the way, still hasn't figured things out.
He should be... Yeah,
he should be there.
What
Ferrari
happened?
still haven't agreed to terms of him leaving or something, which is just
what
such
the fuck is going on?
I don't know. The point is that you've got a lot of people like, you know, and from everyone from Andy Kell to Newey that kind of have been at big teams enough to kind of go, I think they'll be able to figure things out for 2026 and understand the difference of this will correlate, this won't, to where I think they are the one team, like Sauber shouldn't, but they should absolutely write this year off and just say, fuck it, let's just deal with the pain and not spend a penny on this year's car. I think would be the best choice for them, because they could like I'm sure that Newey could go, hey, we designed this thing for 2026, but we're not sure if it's going to work. Can we adapt a version of it for 2025 and chuck it on the car for a practice session or something?
My worry is that I don't think they have any kind of confidence that their tools are calibrated well.
Yeah, and I think that's where Nui will come in and work with them on that. But my
Yeah.
point is, like, that's less of a concern for me than it would be if it was like a Sauber, because I think they have the guys in there who will know straight away. Like, I know I'm putting a lot on Nui here, but Nui, of all people, has gone into new teams enough that if he says, put it this way, if Nui comes in next week and says, I'm writing off 2025, I'll be like, he knows what he's doing. Like, you know, like if Nui says that, I won't be like,
to back him, right?
oh, I don't know if that's a good decision. Like, Nui knows better than I do. So let's go.
Precisely. I mean, and you have. The thing is, at this stage, what are they gaining? I think, what are they gaining out of it? There's really nothing for Aston Martin to gain out of 2025 right now.
Yeah.
The problem is that the team decays. That's the worry.
I have a slight problem of I need to jump on a call in 4 minutes time.
Okay, we only have Alpine left, right? That's it.
So let's do Alpine and wrap this up.
Yeah.
This
cool.
week, I told you, has been a nightmare. Like, every time, even starting this podcast, like, I'm ready in 10, and then, I'm not ready in 10.
I'm not.
So let's, what are we saying about Alpine to end this off?
Yeah, I'm surprised how good they are.
Very good. Do you think they'll be actually in the top 4?
No, not top 4. They might snatch a few podiums, and Doon impressed me, by the way. He looked good. I don't know. Look, first race, Australia, if he beats Gasly somehow, some way, what the fuck is Flavio going to do in that case? I mean, that's the problem. I think for me, Alpine, at least, they're starting well. But they've started well far too many times in the past. I'll still wait and watch. Proof is in the pudding, right? When it comes to them.
I'm not sure, but they do look. The thing is, where their car, if they can do the same thing that McLaren did, which is a big ask, but just kind of start the season the way they ended it, they'll be in a good foot, and I think that's what pushed them into that position. What I am excited about is I do kind of have the feeling, I think the same as you, that it'll be Williams and Alpine fighting for that best of the rest position.
P5, P6,
The question will be, how close is P5 to P4? Like, could Williams and Alpine be pulling off podiums here and there? That would be exciting.
I think first 3 races are going to show a lot when it comes to this.
Yeah.
Cool.
And on Monday, we'll be back for a season preview. So, exciting.
So,
This is probably our shortest podcast ever. Love it.
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Cool. Yeah.
Subscribe.
Thanks, guys. So, testing roundup. We'll see you soon.
Take it easy. Bye.